So there's this really tragic case out of Massachusetts where a mother is accused of a crime that is just unthinkable. But what's really making headlines is her defense team's very unusual legal strategy. And today, we're going to break down a case that really boils down to one fascinating question. And that question is, can a murder trial actually be split into two separate parts? It's a huge deal, and it's right at the center of the case against Lindsay Clancy. Her lawyers are trying a pretty rare legal move that could completely change how the jury has to think about the evidence. During her first time appearing in court in person, Clancy's defense team made this really unusual request to bifurcate her trial. So, what in the world does that actually mean? So, what exactly is bifurcation? It sounds like a super technical legal term, but the idea is actually pretty straightforward. It just means splitting one trial into two separate parts. The whole goal is to stop the jury from letting the raw emotion and the horrific details of the crime influence their decision on a totally separate question. Here's how it would work. In phase one, the jury would decide one thing, and one thing only. Did Lindsay Clancy physically commit these acts? They wouldn't even be allowed to consider her mental state. Not yet. Only if they answer yes to that first question does the trial move on to phase two, and that's when they would hear a whole new set of evidence to decide if she was criminally responsible for those actions. To really get why the defense is pushing so hard for this two-part trial, we have to go back and look at the heartbreaking events that led us to this point. So this all happened back in January of 2023. That's when Lindsay Clancy was charged with the murder of her 3 young children. And her children were so young. Cora was 5, Dawson was 3, and baby Callan was just 8 months old. The prosecution's case is that she strangled them with exercise bands while her husband was out of the house for a very short time. Now, after the alleged attack on her children, authorities say that she then went to a second-story window and jumped, trying to take her own life. She survived the fall, but it left her paralyzed. And these incredibly tragic details are the very reason the defense wants this two-part trial. They want the jury to look at the act itself completely separately from Lindsay Clancy's state of mind. And this sets up two totally opposing arguments. On one side, you have the prosecution. Their argument is pretty direct. Her actions were calculated, they were deliberate. But the defense? They're painting a completely different picture. They're describing a mother in the absolute grips of a severe postpartum psychosis who was allegedly overprescribed a whole cocktail of medications that, they argue, made it impossible for her to even form criminal intent. So, in response to all of this, 3 counts of murder, 2 of strangulation, Lindsay Clancy has officially pleaded not guilty, which is what's setting the stage for this really complex legal fight. So while all of this legal maneuvering is happening inside the courtroom, outside, Clancy's family has been there, and they have been very vocal. Her father, Mike Musgrove, he spoke to reporters right outside the courthouse, and he just really stressed that the family's support for his daughter is unwavering. And her mother, Paula, said the same thing, framing this whole thing not around the act itself, but around the person that she truly believed her daughter is. So what's next? Well, the judge is set to hear the arguments about this whole bifurcation thing on March 2nd. And that decision is huge. It will basically determine the entire structure of the trial, which, as of right now, is set to start on July 20th. So really, the judge's decision here is going to shape how this entire tragic story is told in court. And it leaves all of us grappling with one of the toughest questions in our entire justice system. How do you possibly weigh a horrific act against the complex and often totally invisible state of a person's mind?